Welcome back to Cyberspace. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, and today we're diving deep into an emotion that's probably familiar to all of us: anger. You know that feeling when your heart starts racing, your muscles tense up, and suddenly you're ready to either fight or flee? That's your body's ancient response system kicking in, and it's fascinating how this primal emotion still shapes our modern lives. But here's what makes today's topic particularly interesting. Recent neuroscience research has revealed something unexpected about anger. It turns out that getting angry can actually trigger our brain's reward centers, making it feel oddly satisfying. This might explain why that heated threads debate feels so engaging, even when we know it's not productive, or why we sometimes find ourselves rehearsing arguments in our heads long after they're over. Throughout today's episode, we'll explore this paradox and much more. We'll look at how anger functions in our digital age, its role in our relationships and our society, and most importantly, how we can channel it constructively. Whether you're dealing with personal frustrations or engaged in larger social movements, understanding the psychology of anger is important for using this powerful emotion effectively. Let's start by understanding what actually happens in your brain and body when you get angry. It's pretty remarkable. Within milliseconds of perceiving a threat or an injustice, your brain initiates a complex cascade of reactions. A few years ago, Dr. Eddie Harmon Jones and his team made a fascinating discovery that changed how we think about anger. They found that anger activates the same reward pathways in our brains as positive experiences. Think about that for a second. Your brain might actually be rewarding you for getting angry. But why would our brains reward anger? Dr. Jennifer Lerner's research provides some compelling answers. She found that anger serves several important evolutionary purposes. First, it energizes us to take action against threats and injustice. Unlike fear, which makes us want to retreat, anger makes us feel powerful and capable of changing our situation. It's like our brain's way of saying, hey, something's not right here, but you have the power to fix it. The physiological changes during anger are pretty dramatic as well. Your heart rate increases, your muscles tense, and your body releases a flood of stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. Dr. Laura Kobzanski's research shows that while these responses were great for our ancestors facing physical threats, they can be problematic in modern situations. That snippy email from your colleague probably isn't a survival threat, but your body might react like it is. Here's something particularly interesting from Dr. Raymond Novako's work. Our personal thresholds for anger vary significantly based on genetics, our personal history, and our resilience levels. Some people have what he calls a short fuse. They get angry quickly and intensely, but others have more emotional buffer room. Understanding your personal anger pattern is essential for managing it effectively. For example, just last night, my neighbors were having a loud party until 3 a.m., and I could feel my anger building as the minutes ticked by and I longed for sleep. But understanding the science behind what was happening in my brain helped me reframe the situation. Instead of letting my anger spiral, I could recognize it as my brain's ancient response system misinterpreting an infrequent inconvenience as a threat. Now, let's talk about how anger plays out in our digital world, because this is where things get really interesting. Dr. John Zuller coined the term online disinhibition effect back in 2004, and his insights seem more relevant than ever. He explained why we're more likely to express anger online than in person, and it comes down to several key factors. First, there's the perceived anonymity factor. When we're behind a screen, we feel less connected to our real-world identity and the consequences of our actions. Then there's what he called invisibility. We can't see the immediate impact of our words on others, which makes it easier for us to say things we would never say face-to-face. Dr. Molly Crockett's recent research adds another fascinating layer to this. She found that social media algorithms often amplify angry content because it drives engagement. Think about it. When was the last time you saw a calm, measured discussion go viral? It's usually the heated debates and outraged posts that get the most attention. We're literally being served a steady diet of outrage, and our reward-seeking brains are eating it up. It's even left the digital world and is changing how we consume mainstream media as well. This creates what I call the anger spiral. Someone posts something provocative, it gets amplified by algorithms, more people engage angrily, and suddenly we're in a full-blown online firestorm. The scary part, research shows that exposure to this kind of content can actually lower our threshold for anger in real life. But it's not all doom and gloom. New platforms like Blue Sky are going back to an algorithm-free model of social media. Some other platforms are experimenting with cooling off features like prompts that ask you to reconsider before posting angry comments. And studies show that when people are made aware of how algorithms manipulate their emotions, they're often more likely to take a step back and evaluate their responses. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about how anger affects our closest relationships. This is where Dr. John Gottman's groundbreaking research comes in. After studying thousands of couples over decades, he found something essential. It's not about whether couples get angry, but how they handle that anger. Gottman identified what he calls the four horsemen of relationship apocalypse: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. When anger leads to these behaviors, relationships tend to suffer. But couples who approach conflict with a problem-solving attitude, maintain respect even when angry, and repair relationships after arguments are more likely to stay together and report higher satisfaction. As a side note, we also see these four horsemen rear their ugly heads when discussions about race involve critique of a privileged class from a class commonly perceived by them as less privileged. So, learning to overcome these roadblocks and to receive feedback is going to improve other relationships in your work and life outside of your romantic ones as well. Dr. Deborah Cox's work adds another important layer to this discussion. She found that suppressing anger can be just as harmful as explosive outbursts. When we bottle up our anger, it often leaks out as passive-aggressive behavior, damaging trust and intimacy. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes enormous energy, and eventually it's going to pop up somewhere. Additionally, if you're a woman, suppressing anger has been found to contribute to autoimmune diseases and other problems. It's beneficial to your health to learn to express anger in healthy ways. Why don't we zoom out and look at how anger shapes society as a whole? James Jasper's research shows that moral outrage has been a powerful catalyst for social change throughout history. Think about major social movements from civil rights to environmental protection. They often start with collective anger about an injustice. Dr. Martha Nussbaum makes a critical point, though. Anger must be paired with forward-looking solutions to be truly effective. Pure revenge or retribution rarely leads to positive change. She advocates for what she calls transitional anger that transitions into productive action rather than getting stuck in resentment. Recent studies in social psychology have revealed something fascinating about collective anger. It can actually increase group cohesion and motivate collective action more effectively than other emotions. When people share anger about an injustice, they're more likely to work together to address it. However, there's a dark side to that collective anger as well. Dr. Craig Anderson's research shows how group anger can lead to dehumanization of opponents and escalation of conflict, as we're seeing play out on a large scale in United States politics right now. This is particularly relevant as anger too often seems to be the default mode of discourse. Something that affects all of us is the impact of anger on our physical and mental health. Dr. Laura Kobzanski's groundbreaking research revealed some sobering facts. People who experience frequent or intense anger are at significantly higher risk for cardiovascular disease, weakened immune systems, and other chronic health conditions. And as we mentioned earlier, women are particularly susceptible to this. Think about what happens in your body when you're angry. We mentioned before that your heart rate is increasing, your blood pressure is spiking, and stress hormones are flooding your system. And while this response is helpful in a real emergency, chronic anger keeps your body in this high alert state constantly, essentially wearing down these systems over time. But it's not just your physical health we need to worry about. Dr. Raymond DiGiuseppe's research shows a complex relationship between anger and mental health. Unmanaged anger can contribute to depression, to anxiety, and to chronic stress. It's kind of a vicious cycle. Feeling angry can worsen mental health, and poor mental health can make it harder to manage your anger effectively. The good news: studies show that effective anger management strategies can significantly improve both physical and mental health outcomes. Simple practices like mindfulness meditation and regular exercise can help reduce the physiological impact of anger. Dr. John Rady's work demonstrates how physical activity can help regulate the body's stress response systems, making it easier to manage angry feelings when they arise. What about how culture shapes our experience and expression of anger? Dr. Jean Tsai's fascinating cross-cultural research shows that different societies have radically different views on anger expression. What's considered a normal display of anger in one culture might be seen as completely inappropriate in another. For example, some cultures view anger as a threat to social harmony and strongly discourage its expression. Others see it as a natural assertion of individual rights. Dr. David Matsumoto's studies show how these cultural differences influence everything from facial expressions to conflict resolution styles. This has huge implications in our increasingly globalized world. Think about international workplaces or multicultural communities. What happens when people with different cultural understandings of anger interact? Dr. Michelle Gelfin's research shows how different cultures handle anger through what she calls tight and loose norms. Think about Japan or Singapore. These tight cultures have strict rules about showing emotions, especially anger, which they see as disrupting social harmony. On the flip side, loose cultures, like the United States, are more accepting of emotional expression, including anger. These differences help explain why what seems like a totally normal reaction in one culture might be shocking in another. The key takeaway: there's no universal right way to handle anger. Understanding these cultural differences can help us navigate cross-cultural interactions more effectively and develop more inclusive approaches to anger management. This brings us to one of the most powerful aspects of anger: its role in social justice movements. Dr. Loretta Ross talks about constructive anger, anger that drives positive social change rather than destructive behavior. Throughout history, righteous anger has been a catalyst for addressing systemic injustices. Consider the civil rights movement, the women's suffrage movement, or more recent social justice initiatives. Dr. Erica Chenoweth's research on civil resistance and social movements shows how anger about injustice can actually enhance moral perception and motivate collective action for change. But here's the challenge: how do we keep this anger productive rather than destructive? Cornel West's work emphasizes the importance of channeling anger into organized strategic action. It's not enough to just be angry. That anger needs to be paired with clear goals and practical strategies for achieving them. This type of focused anger can actually strengthen communities rather than divide them. When people share anger about legitimate injustices and work together to address them, it can create powerful bonds and drive meaningful change. So how do we work with anger productively? Let's look at some evidence-based strategies that actually work. Dr. Jerry Deffenbacher's research has shown impressive results with cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. These techniques include several effective strategies for managing anger. Cognitive reframing helps us learn to interpret triggering situations differently, while relaxation training, like deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation, can calm our physiological response. Developing strong communication skills allows us to express our anger assertively rather than aggressively, and focusing on problem solving rather than just venting helps channel anger into constructive action. Each of these techniques gives us practical tools for handling anger in healthier ways. One particularly effective technique comes from Dr. Paul Ekman's research on emotions. He found that simply naming our emotions as they arise can reduce their intensity. When you feel anger building, just saying to yourself, "I'm getting angry," helps create a much needed moment of pause. Mindfulness practices have also shown promising results. Dr. John Kabat-Zinn's research demonstrates that regular mindfulness practice can help us catch angry thoughts before they escalate into actions we regret. It's like developing an early warning system for our emotions. For our final segment, let's explore practical ways to transform anger into constructive action. And this isn't just about managing anger, it's about using it as a force for positive change in our lives and communities. Dr. James Gross's research on emotion regulation strategies offers some powerful insights. He's found that the most effective changemakers are those who can maintain constructive tension, using anger as motivation while staying focused on solutions rather than blame. Research has shown several effective ways to transform anger into positive action by channeling it into creative projects or advocacy work, using it to identify problems that need solving, transforming personal anger into community organizing, and directing that energy into building new systems and structures. Each of these approaches takes the powerful force of anger and redirects it towards constructive change, rather than letting it remain destructive. Organizations that work with at-risk youth have had particular success with these approaches. Instead of trying to suppress anger about difficult circumstances, they help young people channel that energy into community service, advocacy, or creative expression. Remember what Dr. Martha Nussbaum said: the goal isn't to eliminate anger, but to transform it into forward-looking energy that drives positive change. Whether you're dealing with personal frustrations or systemic injustices, asking "what can this anger help me create or change" can turn a challenging emotion into a powerful force for good. As we wrap up today's exploration of anger, remember this: anger isn't your enemy. It's a natural emotion that can either destroy or drive positive change, and the key is how we channel it. Whether you're facing personal frustrations or engaged in larger social issues, understanding anger's dual nature can help you use it more constructively. The research we've covered today shows that anger is complex. It can reward us neurologically while potentially damaging our relationships and society. But when we understand its mechanisms and learn to work with it skillfully, anger can be a powerful force for positive change. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. When was the last time you felt angry? How did you handle it? What strategies have worked best for you? Share your experiences with us on social media or visit our new Patreon to join the discussion. The links will be in our show notes. Next week, we'll be exploring another fascinating aspect of human psychology, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Until then, this has been your host, Leslie Poston, signing off, reminding you, stay curious.